Hi, I'm Mimi Geerges. Asra Nomani says she's a liberal Muslim feminist, which to some would seem like a contradiction. She's an author and former journalist fighting for women's rights.
What they are trying to argue is that a woman has to cover herself so that she's not a sexual temptation to men. That kind of philosophy is, to me, no different than rape culture.
Welcome to the Mimi Geerges Show. American Muslim Asra Nomani is of South Asian descent. Raised in a moderate Muslim family, she's been fighting for women's equality in the Islamic community and for an interpretation of Islam that promotes human rights for everyone. She's a co-founder of the Muslim Reform Movement and the author of the memoir, Standing Alone, An American Woman's Struggle for the Soul of Islam. Asra, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you so much, Mimi.
Why do you think there's such a fraught relationship between Islam and women?
Well, I think that like all faiths and all cultures have had this struggle about women's rights and girls' rights. Islam is still having that conflict. Men have tried to take control and power in the communities throughout all of society, and in our Muslim communities, unfortunately, they have so much of the power, and so that tension exists, and they use religion. They use our faith of Islam to maintain their power and control, and we, the bad girls of Islam, are fighting back.
What does a Muslim feminist believe?
Well, what you believe is what I consider all feminism to be about, the equality of people. That means the equality of all rights, the equality of all benefits in society. And so, for example, you believe that a woman is equal witness to a man. So unfortunately, in most interpretations of Islam, as you know, a woman is half the witness of a man. You believe that a woman can show her hair, a man can show his hair, that we are not the carriers of honor in our communities, that responsibility lies with everyone. In Islamic feminism, you believe that ultimately a woman and a girl has the right to be all that she wants to be. She can marry whom she wants to marry. She can get divorced if she wants to get divorced. She can make her own sexual decisions. She has the right to an orgasm, very controversial idea. And she has a right to stand at the front of the mosque and be a spiritual leader also in our community.
We're going to get to that because you caused some waves doing that. But first I want to ask you about the recent controversy over the Women's Chess Championship. It's being held in Iran, and the U.S. champion has said she is boycotting. She's not going to go.
So this is a young woman, 22 years old. Her name is Nazi, and she grew up in Georgia, in the former Soviet Republic. So she has a real clear sense of tyranny, oppression, and repression in a completely different venue. She came to America, she became America's chess champion, and guess what? The International Chess Federation, just a little while ago, decided that the next World Championship for women would be held in Tehran. So the little issue with that is that Tehran has a ban on any woman entering the country who dares to show her hair. So while Americans are rightly having this conversation about whether the US should have a ban on Muslims or not, we rightly discuss whether or not people who are gay should be allowed to freely enter countries. This is a fundamental human right. We're not too sexy for our hair. Nazi is not too sexy as a chess champion to show her hair. And she's standing up and she's saying, this is workplace discrimination. What else are the consequences? She has a male coach. Many of the women have male coaches. What happens in Iran? If you are not married to the person, you can become a criminal for moral crimes if you talk privately to your coach.
So she has said, right. I'm not going because I refuse to wear a hijab.
Yeah, and I think what's so important is that it is Iran that is boycotting Nazi.
But is it that big of a deal? Why doesn't she just cover her hair and just kind of respect the local customs?
You know, it's a huge deal because ultimately the headscarf is a symbol of the Islamic Republic that has become Iran. It is a symbol that is an indicator of the theocracy and the dictatorship that exists there. It's a fundamental human right to be able to dress as we wish, you know, by these international standards that the Olympics also agrees with. And so this is a sporting event for which she should be held to the international standards, not a particular country's standards. And why does it matter? Because ultimately the headscarf is not required in Islam, and what Iran is forcing upon these women is their interpretation of misogyny. And I think that she's so morally courageous for taking this stand.
You've said this, that the hijab is, quote, a symbol of sexism, misogyny, and purity culture. Isn't it just a headscarf?
It's not. It's not just a piece of cloth. You know, as we know, a stiletto heel, you know, is a symbol of so much more for people. It's not just a shoe, right? Our clothing has symbolism. I'm wearing my cowboy boots today because I'm in my fierce, you know, gender jihad universe right now. A headscarf has been put forward as a requirement for women in Islam over the last 4 decades in particular, while this expression of a political Islam has swept our globe, funded and financed by the governments of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. What they are trying to argue is that a woman has to cover herself so that she's not a sexual temptation to men. And ultimately, that kind of philosophy is, to me, no different than rape culture philosophy. What you are basically saying is that it's a woman's responsibility to maintain order in society. And when we show our hair, as you know, the argument is we cause fitna or chaos. And I believe that that is the excuse that is used to keep girls from going to school, that's kept, you know, keeps women out of the main halls of mosques, and ultimately denies our fundamental human rights. And so if we just dismiss this as a piece of cloth, we completely ignore and miss the second and third order implications of this ideology.
So what do you think of France's ban on the full face veil, which is the burqa? I mean, doesn't that impinge on women's rights that want to wear it?
Yeah, so the issue that I have with the full face burqa is that I do believe that it has safety and security implications. And so I try to be very morally consistent in all of my own values. I don't believe in the headscarf, but every woman has a right to wear the headscarf if she wishes.
You mean the face veil?
I actually mean the headscarf.
The scarf. Okay.
I'm just saying that I don't believe in it. I don't believe that it's a requirement, just as I don't believe that, you know, Amish women have to wear bonnets on their head, you know, but of course they have a right to wear it. I don't believe in the burkini, the wetsuit, you know, that France has also been banning, but women have a right to wear that. With the face veil, I have a different belief because I do consider it a safety and security issue. We are not even allowed to enter Saudi Arabia on our pilgrimage with a face veil. We are not allowed to enter colleges in Egypt with a face veil because they recognize, even in these Muslim societies, that it's a safety and security issue. And so this to me is just logical consistency. We don't allow people with face masks to enter banks or go into the courts for safety and security reasons. I was driving around one day and there was a woman in a full face veil on the Beltway in Washington, D.C. And I was like, okay, I need to like pull over and keep some distance because it's a safety and security issue. And so on that point, it's not about the ideology to me, but about the safety security issue that makes me feel okay about a ban on the face veil. But everything else, I understand that it's a battle we have to fight of ideas.
There's an organization called World Hijab Day.
Right.
And it asks that on a particular day, women, regardless of faith, all wear the hijab just for tolerance and understanding and, you know, interfaith kind of goodwill. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's important, you know, I'm a journalist and I always believe it's important to follow the money. So it's important to know that World Hijab Day was started by a woman who has a scarf company, right? And so she has a business interest in getting scarves on our head, for one thing. But secondly, ideologically, I have a problem with World Hijab Day, because what you are not only asking people to do when they put a scarf on their head is you're asking them to also accept the values of this purity culture. And I especially say to my well-intentioned liberal friends that if you don't believe that it's a woman's fault for, sexual harassment or sexual assault, then you should not go along with this idea that it is our responsibility to keep order in society by covering our hair. And so I ask them very gently, because I know that people are not doing this out of malice of any sort, but actually for the good intention of plurality, as you said, and tolerance. Just consider what your values are, and maybe you could support diversity by inviting somebody over for a nice potluck dinner, instead of appropriating values that are not really even your own.
But I think proponents would say, look, I only wear the hijab for modesty and as a symbol of faith. I don't do all that other symbolism that you're talking about of purity culture. I just leave that aside.
Yeah, and a woman may very well wear stiletto heels just because it makes her look taller. I totally respect the right of everyone to come to their own choice for their own reasons. Like, I would never ask, and I never have asked a woman to take off her scarf or come into the main hall of mosques with me when women are otherwise meant to be put in the balconies. I understand and respect individual choice, but we would be so naive if we didn't recognize, these books after books, I've brought them here, that, sell this idea that the woman is only pure and chaste and good if she covers her hair. This is an ideology. This is a propaganda campaign.
Why is it such a big deal for them? This whole concept of you've got to cover your hair.
Just imagine it. You were able then to control a woman down to every strand of her hair. I mean, that's like remarkable power. And we've been there. I've been there. I call them the hijab police. When you go to the mosque, I call them the enforce hers. I go there. I once wore, I call it my hoodie hijab. I wore a sweatshirt and put the hood over. And when I bent over, the woman in the back, Yasmin, wasn't even praying. Like, she was literally standing there observing me, right? And she then said, sister, afterwards, when you bent over, I could see the small of your back. And I'm like, Sister Yasmin, like, why are you checking out my butt at the mosque? Like, why? Why are you doing this? And unfortunately, it's not just the men, it's the women who are actually enforcing this code. And I know that they're all well-intentioned on some level, but ultimately I challenge them because it's about control.
What kind of reaction do you get when you speak out against the hijab?
Oh my gosh, it has been so fierce. Like, I have known for years that this level of control is something that I wanted to write about, but it was this colleague of mine from Egypt who gave me the intellectual power and strength, because I brought here, the Quran. 8 mentions of hijab in the Quran. Not once does it ever mean headscarf. So my colleague Hala Arafa was able to give me that certainty, that this is not a requirement for us. And in fact, in the Saudi Quran, they add in parentheses, you should cover yourself, including your face, and all but one eye. So it's like sort of like the pirate version of modesty. And I'm like, how do we pull that off? And what does that mean? Those poor women in Afghanistan, right? Looking through the world through a screen. So the reaction, oh my gosh, it's been ridiculous. They're so threatened by this challenge. And I realized by the backlash how fiercely important this idea is of controlling us to every strand of our hair. We were called, of course, every name in the book. Munafiq is one of the favorites. It's a word, as you know, that means hypocrite. It's somebody who's left the faith and is betraying the faith. And that label is worthy of death, as a death sentence, according to the worst, interpreters of the faith. And who were they? They weren't just the extremists in our community. They were the middle of the road people, who are selling Islam in America, not through the lens of a progressive liberal interpretation, but really an orthodoxy. They are people who espouse the values of the Muslim Brotherhood, the Saudi Salafi system, the Qatari Wahhabi system, and They are on our TV stations. They are in the Huffington Post and the New York Times op-ed pages. And they are threatened by any challenge to this control over us. And I say to them, they called us fringe, so I went to Walmart and I bought a bunch of fringe because we are not the fringe, we are the mainstream, and we're going to be beautiful in it.
You say in one of your articles that, quote, America is not at war with Islam, we are at war with an ideology and theology of Islam. How are we supposed to fight that kind of a war?
We fight it just like we have fought every other bad ideology in the world. You know, we compete in the marketplace of ideas, and we compete honestly.
But you can't do that here because it's a religion too. So, I mean, you'll just completely get shut down. You're an Islamophobe, or
Right.
you're not an expert, so
Right.
you don't know, and you
Right.
can't talk about it.
But we do. And that's the beauty of one, living in America, and that's the beauty of being in the 21st century, is if you have the confidence and if you have the will within your heart to believe in the righteous path, then you will proceed on it. And I consider our place right now the same as the abolitionists, you know, in early American history who fought the idea of slavery as acceptable within Christian faith. I believe that we are on the path of the suffragettes who denied the idea of women as second-class citizens, also put forward in the name of faith. We are with the brave people in Christianity who have challenged orthodoxy and the Inquisition, and we can persevere. And you know, the beauty is that through the internet, I am connected to those amazing brave women in Saudi Arabia who are hashtag end male guardianship, you know, that are not allowed to go to the Kentucky Fried Chicken without their little brother as their male chaperone. I'm connected to the women in Iran who are putting out photos of their hair blowing in the wind, hashtag my stealthy freedom. And so we're not alone, and that's what's, I think, really scary and frightening to many of these people in power, because progress is inevitable and we will win.
Do you, as a Muslim, not feel offended when people say that, you know, like ISIS is following what Islam actually teaches and that they're following the example of Islam's prophet?
I'm not offended at all, because this is our battle. It is in the Quran, you know, chapter 9, verse 5, that says, slay the mushrikun wherever you find them.
These are the infidels.
Yeah, and the mushrikun, as you know, is a word that uses the word shirk, which is to equate something to God. And so it's that verse that they use then to kill the Coptic Christians, right, on the beaches of Libya. It is what they use to even put that poor Jordanian Air Force pilot in a cage and burn him alive because he has now gone on the side of the mushrikun. It is a challenge inside our faith, just like Deuteronomy has been a challenge inside of Christianity, putting forward ideas of stoning and violence and murder. We have to just say that those verses, those practices of the 7th century that are incompatible with our 21st century ideas of women's rights, secular governance, and peace need to stay in the 7th century. You know, I'm not ever insulted by it, because that is our challenge. That's our intellectual and ideological challenge, to persevere with a more progressive interpretation.
I want to ask you about your mosque where you grew up in West Virginia. In 2003, you challenged the rules at your West Virginia mosque, because there the women have to go in from the back door and they have to pray in the balcony. What did you do?
So I grew up in Morgantown, West Virginia. I never went to their mosque because the men had imported to America this idea that women don't go to the mosque. So in October 2003, a new mosque is open and they're so proud of it. And so I walk up to the front door with my son, just a year old, on my hip. And I was wearing the headscarf that I'd worn in Mecca, where I had ironically been able to go through every door and every entrance of the sacred mosque of Mecca. This Egyptian board of directors president stood before me and he said, "Sister, take the back door." and he motioned to this back stairwell, to this back door, and everything, like my entire life flashed before me in that moment. Every moment when I had been told that I couldn't run track because my arms were showing, my legs were exposed. Every moment that I was told that I had to marry who my family chose, you know, every moment that had been a denial of my rights as a woman and a girl in this world. And the reality of the day to me also was in my mind, because the mosque has been used, unfortunately, to put forward extremist interpretations of Islam. And if we as women are shut out of the mosque, then we cannot engage in that conversation. And so all that came into my mind, and I thought to myself, like, this is a crossroads for me, and I decided to step forward. And I walked in through the front door, and some days later, when I got the courage, I also went into the main hall. And in the main hall, with my father there supporting me and my mother there supporting me, the men came and they surrounded us, my mother and me, and they yelled, "Sister, it's better for you upstairs." I said, "Brother, I'm very happy praying here."
Was that a threat?
Yeah, it was all very threatening, you know, because at the mosque what happens is you go and you are in a vulnerable position on the ground, and they come and they surround you from above. And I have always maintained my calm by turning to the mystical part of my faith, this recitation where we say Allahu, Allahu. You intake the divine, you breathe in the divine, and you breathe out the divine. And to me, that's the cycle. You know, that's the cycle of divinity in this universe that includes all of us equally and fairly. And
so did you leave?
I did not leave. I did not leave. I never left. I've never left those main halls, because we have a right to the front rows, we have a right to the pulpit, and it's not just a matter of real estate, it's a matter of presence. You know, it's a matter of this idea of Islamic feminism, this idea that we're equal in our
But you were put
practice.
on trial.
Yes.
In the mosque.
I was.
What was that about?
Literally, unfortunately, another Egyptian brother of mine, the other new leader at the mosque, you know, because what are these men practicing? But they are practicing in my mosque in Morgantown the interpretation of Islam that is the Muslim Brotherhood, the Ikhwan Muslimin. You know, that is what they have imported to America, and they think that they can control our mosque with that order. And so this man, an engineering professor at the university there, literally drew names out of a hat for the men that were going to be on my jury, because they were men. And they put me on trial to have me banned from the mosque. And as you know, it happens in the culture, they never finished the trial. They just kind of kept it hanging like a black cloud of shame over our family and over me. My poor father went to the emergency room, you know, because he'd poured his heart and soul into the community in the mosque. But he's such a great man. He's like, you know, the Emma Watson campaign, he for she, that's my father. Mm-hmm. My mother, she stopped getting invited to the potluck dinner parties, and she was awesome. She's like, they were boring anyway. Yeah. You know, so they stood with me, and that was my community, and that was my group that I cared about, and their exclusion has not dampened my own beliefs here.
I want to ask you about the Muslim Reform Movement.
Yeah.
You co-founded it. What is it that you're trying to reform? Because I know people would say, look, there's nothing wrong with Islam. What are you trying to reform about it?
Yeah, we would not have to reform anything if we did not have this ideology of Salafism exported to the world by the governments of Qatar and Saudi Arabia for the last 40 years. The Islam that I learned as a little girl and that my parents have practiced is a religion of women's rights, peace, and secular governance. This political Islam is what we are trying to challenge, and that is really the bottom line. But it's something that needs to be challenged. You know, they have so much power, they have money, as we know, and we as Muslims and the world as a community has suffered for the last 4 decades because of this extremist ideology. And I say to the world, you know, wake up to this, join us, because more blood will spill as long as we stay silent. So we have to have the moral courage to stand up.
You know, you've called yourself a liberal Muslim feminist, but a lot of liberals in this country actually accuse you of demonizing Muslims. What's
Yeah.
your response?
Yeah, the liberals who are, you know, with good intention, trying to protect Muslims, but what I say to them is that actually they are the ones who are selling Islam short when they want to, you know, make excuses and avoid a conversation about the extremism within our community. Isolate the extremists. That's what we've best done in society. We had to isolate the KKK. You know, we have to isolate the folks in South Africa that believed in white supremacy. Isolate those people that are intolerant and build and support those people who have the same values as you do. And so what I gently ask them is to really recognize that you're doing nobody a service by continuing to make excuses for an interpretation of the faith that is really going to come out to destroy you too one day.
Asra, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you. Thank
Enjoyed
you so
talking to
much
you.
for all of your just passion and care about this issue. This is what we need.
This has been the Mimi Geerges Show. You can see all of our programs on WHUT.org and YouTube. Connect with us on Facebook and Twitter and leave me your comments there. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me again next time.